Imagine this. You wake up in a room you've never seen before. The walls are made of mirrors, flawless, stretching endlessly in every direction. But there's something strange. These mirrors don't reflect your true image. In some, you appear more beautiful than you are. In others, hideous. Some show you as confident, others as ashamed. In a few, you vanish entirely. You wave your hand, some mirrors follow, some lag behind. None of them are consistent. You scream and the sound bounces back at you, not as your own voice, but as laughter, applause, judgment, silence. This is your world, but it's not a dream, it's society. Every day, without knowing, you wake up inside this hall of mirrors. You walk through it, make choices in it, love in it, fear in it. Each mirror, a rule, a role, a reflection crafted not by truth, but by expectation. What you should be, what you must not be, what's acceptable, what's shameful. The mirrors don't ask you who you are, they tell you. And the more you listen, the more you forget what your original face ever looked like. Here's the question that should unsettle you. What if everything you believe about yourself has been constructed by what society wanted you to see, not what you actually are? We talk about freedom, we chant about individuality, we dress uniquely, post differently, rebel in socially approved ways. But beneath it all, is it really you living your life, or merely a reflection animated by unseen hands? Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how does one become anything real in a world obsessed with images? Ask yourself, why do you chase success the way you do? Why does failure feel like death, even when no one else is watching? Why does silence scare you? Why do you crave validation from people you don't even like? Why do you lie awake at night, rehearsing things you'll never say? What if the answers to these questions aren't rooted in your own psyche, but in a mirror society built long before you were born? Some mirrors reflect power, some shame, others reflect dreams that were never yours. But somehow, you want them, desperately. You crave their approval, their reward, their permission to feel worthy. But what happens when you finally get it? A new mirror appears, a new standard, a new emptiness. This is the paradox at the heart of the human experience. You are taught to find yourself by conforming to what others expect. You are promised freedom, but only if you follow the script. You are told to love yourself, but only once you've earned enough approval. This is the lie that society whispers with a smile and a standing ovation, and most never question it. But some do. A few look into the mirror and don't like what they see. Not because it's ugly, but because it's not theirs. They feel it in their bones. This is not me. This life, this performance, this constant war between how I feel and how I must appear is a betrayal. They feel alien in crowds, disconnected even when surrounded. They sense the pressure to laugh at what isn't funny, to celebrate what doesn't matter, to pretend they're okay when they're falling apart. They notice how smiles can be masks, how praise can be manipulation, how normal can be insane. And they wonder, what if society isn't a reflection of reality, but a distortion of it? What if every mirror has been positioned to keep you facing a particular direction, away from the truth of your nature and toward a fantasy you were never meant to chase? These are not rhetorical musings. These are the cracks that form when a person begins to wake up. The moment you begin to question the mirror, it shatters. And when it shatters, something terrifying and beautiful happens. You catch a glimpse of what lies beyond the reflection. But it's raw, it's disorienting, it doesn't flatter. It's you, unfiltered. Are you ready to see that version of yourself? Because once you do, you can never go back. Not to the roles, not to the applause, not to the hollow sense of safety offered by conformity. And yet, most turn away. They tape the mirrors back together. They pretend they never saw what they saw. Because the truth, unfiltered, comes with a cost. So here we are, standing in a room of mirrors, some of them cracked, some still pristine. And one great question echoes through the silence like a storm waiting to break. What are you refusing to see? The most dangerous prisons are not made of stone and steel, but of belief. You were born into a world already dreaming, its myths embedded in textbooks, advertising, social norms, the very language you speak. Before you could choose, you were told what to value. Before you could think, you were taught what to fear. Every moment since, you've been measured against an invisible ideal. But who created that ideal? Why does success look like status? Why does beauty come with shame? Why does weakness feel like failure? Why does your worth feel like it needs to be proven? The problem is not just personal, it is systemic, ancestral, archetypal. It lives in your nervous system, in your shadows, in your inherited stories. Carl Jung called this the collective unconscious, the reservoir of all human experience, myths, fears, and instincts, a realm beneath awareness, shaping the symbols we obey without question. The mirror society holds up to you. It's polished with the fingerprints of generations, and within it, you are not just reflecting, you are reenacting. Jung also introduced the concept of the persona, the mask we wear in public, the version of ourselves we craft to fit in, to be loved, to avoid rejection. It is necessary, but when the mask fuses with the face, the real self suffocates. You were not born with a persona, you were born with potential. But over time, the pressure to perform, to meet expectations, to survive the social gauntlet, carves a version of you that may be praised, admired, even rewarded, but no longer feels whole, no longer feels real. This, Jung warns, is when the shadow grows. The shadow is everything you have repressed, denied, or deemed unacceptable because society told you it was ugly. Your anger, your desire, your trauma, your despair, your wildness, your power. And here's the most unsettling part. The more you reject the shadow, the more power it gains over you. It leaks into your relationships, your addictions, your fears. It sabotages your happiness and distorts your reality. You see parts of yourself in others and hate them for it. You project what you cannot accept. You attack the mirror, not realizing it only reflects your own fragmentation. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this clearly. He wrote, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." Nietzsche wasn't warning you about monsters. He was warning you about denial. When you refuse to see yourself fully, when you cling to the persona and exile the shadow, you become blind to your own contradictions. And that blindness manifests as judgment, anxiety, envy, and existential dread. Society reinforces this blindness. It rewards performance. It pathologizes depth. It monetizes your insecurities and labels your intuition as rebellion. You are not meant to question the mirror. You are meant to decorate it. Arthur Schopenhauer, the bleak philosopher of will and suffering, argued that human desire is an endless, painful striving. We want things not because they fulfill us, but because we cannot bear emptiness. So society fills us with wants, status, pleasure, admiration, disguised as needs. You chase them not because they are meaningful, but because you fear what's left when they're gone. But the truth is, what's left is you, the real you. And that, for many, is more terrifying than any failure. We are taught to avoid suffering, to numb discomfort, to scroll, consume, perform. But suffering is the doorway to self-knowledge. Pain is not the enemy. It is the mirror cracking, forcing you to look. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist who declared that existence precedes essence, believed that we are condemned to be free. That is, we are thrown into a world without inherent meaning and must carve our own through action and responsibility. But most people do not want freedom. Not really. Freedom demands accountability. It strips away excuses. It forces you to see that your life is a mirror of your choices. So instead, we cling to false narratives. We internalize roles: victim, hero, martyr, villain. We define ourselves by our trauma or our achievements. We let culture, religion, media, and institutions decide what's noble, what's shameful, what's real. But if you were to peel all of that back, if you stripped yourself of roles, status, story, What would remain? That question is not just psychological, it is spiritual. And that is why we avoid it. Because beneath the roles is vulnerability. Beneath the persona is chaos. Beneath the striving is emptiness. But not the nihilistic emptiness Sartre feared. The kind of emptiness the mystic spoke of. The silence that precedes truth. The absence that reveals presence. The void that is not a pit, but a beginning. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of Auschwitz, found this truth in horror. He saw men broken by suffering and men who transcended it. He wrote, "When we are no longer able to chai, now imagine this. You wake up every morning and step into the same dance. The choreography was written before you were born. You dress in the armor of normalcy, sip your coffee like a ritual, commute like a cog, and scroll through digital illusions that whisper who you should be, what you should want, what you should fear. But deep down, something aches. Something trembles beneath the performance. You smile at the right people. You nod in the right meetings. You post the right captions. You laugh at the right jokes. But every night, when the noise fades and the mirror grows still, there's that flicker of unease, that faint pulse of truth knocking from beneath your ribs. The question returns, is this really me? But you push it away, because acknowledging it would shatter too much. This is how the unseen consequences of society's mirror slowly corrode us, from the inside out. The first casualty is your authenticity, not in the performative sense, the buzzword on self-help posters, but in the sacred trembling sense. The kind of authenticity that comes from aligning your inner world with your outer actions. But when the mirror shows you only what's acceptable, when your value is measured in external validation, you learn to abandon your truth in exchange for applause. You become a version of yourself engineered for survival, not expression. You begin censoring your thoughts, downplaying your pain, shrinking your joy, diluting your dreams. You become fluent in disconnection. And worst of all, you forget what your voice even sounded like before it was edited. The second casualty is your capacity to feel deeply. We are not taught to feel. We are taught to manage, suppress, optimize. Emotions become problems to solve, not truths to explore. Anger becomes a threat. Sadness, a weakness. Grief, an inconvenience. Joy even becomes suspect. Too loud, too much, too vulnerable. So we numb, we distract, we scroll. Neurologically, this disconnection is not neutral. When you suppress emotion, your brain begins to rewire. The limbic system, responsible for emotional regulation, becomes dysregulated. The prefrontal cortex, the logic gate, tries to take over, but it cannot compensate for the deep well of unprocessed experience. This leads to chronic stress, decision fatigue, emotional flatlining. You find yourself bored but anxious, exhausted but unable to rest, surrounded but profoundly lonely. Why? Because when we avoid truth, we pay the price with our nervous systems. You were never meant to be this divided, and your biology knows it. The third casualty is your relationships. When the mirror you look into is distorted, every connection becomes a negotiation between illusions. You attract people based on your mask, not your essence. You fall in love with projections, not presence. Friendships are curated performances. Vulnerability becomes strategy, not intimacy. Even family bonds rot under the pressure of unspoken roles and outdated scripts. You don't say what you really feel. They don't ask what you really need. Everyone plays the part. No one knows who wrote the play. And here's the great tragedy. You could be surrounded by people and still feel utterly alone. Not because you lack love, but because no one has ever truly seen the real you. Because you haven't either. The fourth casualty is meaning. This is the most subtle and devastating consequence of all. When society's mirror defines your worth in likes, wealth, appearance, or productivity, then meaning becomes externalized. You start chasing goals not because they stir your soul, but because they validate your existence. You don't build a life, you assemble a brand. But when meaning is outsourced, identity becomes fragile. The moment the applause stops, the identity cracks. The moment the relationship ends, you unravel. The moment the job is lost, you lose the thread of who you are. And in that silence, the void opens, and it stares back. This is where existential crises begin. Not from tragedy, but from truth breaking through the noise. You realize you've climbed a mountain only to find the summit was someone else's dream. You built a life only to find yourself estranged within it. You followed all the rules only to feel more lost than ever. And this isn't rare. This is common. This is epidemic. The modern world suffers from a spiritual anemia. We're overfed with information and starving for wisdom, connected by technology but isolated in spirit, educated in facts but blind to self. And society keeps the illusion alive because it profits from your confusion. Your insecurities are monetized. Your desires are manipulated. Your attention is harvested. Your identity is sold back to you in algorithms, fashion, and dogma. You're not just a consumer of the mirror. You are its fuel. And yet you wonder why anxiety rises, why depression lingers, why burnout spreads like wildfire across generations. These aren't random afflictions. They are the screams of a soul denied. They are the spiritual cost of living someone else's truth. Now step back. Look at the bigger picture. How does this play out across a culture? A society that cannot see itself honestly becomes a society addicted to distraction and division. We point fingers instead of facing shadows. We scapegoat instead of healing. We build echo chambers to silence discomfort. We turn politics into theater, news into entertainment, morality into marketing. The mirror doesn't just warp the individual, it warps the world. We start to fear the different. We mock the vulnerable. We idolize narcissism. We criminalize pain. And all the while, the inner world collapses. Slowly, quietly, tragically. Because what we refuse to see doesn't disappear. It metastasizes. And here's the cruelest twist. The more the mirror fractures, the more we try to fix the reflection, not the source. We chase therapy as performance, mindfulness as trend, wellness as luxury, but the shadow remains, watching, waiting, whispering. You cannot heal a wound you won't admit exists. And now we arrive at the crossroads. The pain is no longer deniable. The reflection is cracked. The consequences have begun to surface in every realm. Personal, relational, cultural, existential. So the question is no longer, is something wrong? The question is, are you willing to finally look? Because if you are, if you can summon the courage to stop fixing the mirror and start facing yourself, then a door opens, not back to who you were before the mask, but forward into who you were always meant to become. But be warned, once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. Once you feel what's real, the illusion becomes unbearable. And once the mirror shatters, you either rebuild it or you rebel. Imagine this. You're standing in front of a mirror that's cracked. Shards scatter at your feet. The image is fragmented. You see glimpses of yourself, your eyes in one corner, your mouth in another, your soul somewhere behind it all, unreachable. For years, you've been adjusting the mirror, polishing it, angling the light just right, but now you stop. You don't reach for the glue. You reach for the hammer, because sometimes freedom doesn't come from fixing the lie. It comes from destroying the illusion. This is the rebellion, but it doesn't look like protest signs or viral hashtags. It begins silently, invisibly, in the private chambers of the mind, in the trembling moment when you decide, I will no longer betray myself. That's the first act of war, refusing to lie to yourself. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he also warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. To rebel is to make the unconscious conscious, to drag your shadows into the light, to meet the parts of yourself you were taught to exile, your anger, your grief, your hunger, your desire for something more. But beware, this kind of truth-telling is not glamorous. It is raw. It is messy. It burns away illusions like wildfire through dry grass. You will question your relationships, your career, your values. You will look at the life you've built and ask, was any of this mine? You might lose friends. You might disappoint family. You might feel like you're dying. But something new is being born. This is the alchemy of awakening, and it always begins with destruction. Now here's the second act of rebellion, creating without permission. You stop waiting for the world to validate your voice. You stop asking if your art is good enough, if your truth is appropriate, if your desires are reasonable. You write, you paint, you speak, you sing, not to perform, but to reclaim. Because expression is not about impressing others. It's about becoming whole. Think of Søren Kierkegaard, the father of existentialism, who spoke of the sickness unto death. He didn't mean physical death. He meant the death that comes from living outside your true self, the slow erosion of your spirit under layers of false identity. His answer? To live in what he called absolute relation with the absolute, a life rooted in unshakable personal truth. That is what rebellion looks like. It is not noise, it is depth. Not chaos, but clarity. Not escape, but return. Now for the third act, embracing discomfort as sacred. Everything in society tells you to flee discomfort, numb it, ignore it, buy something to soothe it. But discomfort is not the enemy, it is the compass. It tells you where the lie lives. It tells you what still needs healing. It tells you where your boundaries were crossed, where your truth was silenced, where your soul was neglected. To rebel is to sit with it, to breathe into it, to ask, what are you trying to show me? This is where you stop blaming the world for your pain and start learning from it. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and the author of Man's Search for Meaning, found that suffering, when faced directly, could be the gateway to transcendence. He wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. You are not powerless. You are pregnant with power you've been taught to fear." The fourth act of rebellion. Redefining success. Strip it of numbers. Strip it of applause. Strip it of likes, promotions, and polished resumes. Ask yourself, what would success look like if no one else could see it but me? Maybe it's the quiet peace of waking up without dread. Maybe it's writing a poem and never showing anyone. Maybe it's walking away from a toxic job, even if it costs you status. Maybe it's saying no. Maybe it's saying yes to something everyone warned you against. That's rebellion, living by a metric that honors your soul, not just your ego. And now, the fifth act, unmasking love. When you see through society's mirror, your relationships will change. You'll realize many were built on performance, not presence. You'll see where you were loved for your compliance, not your truth. You'll mourn, but you'll also begin to taste a different kind of connection. One that doesn't demand perfection, one that can hold contradictions, one that says, I see your shadow and I'm still here. This is the love that heals, the love that rebellion makes possible. Because when you stop performing, you give others permission to do the same. You become a mirror, not the distorted kind, but a true one. A mirror that reflects back essence, not expectation. And this is how the rebellion spreads, not through force, but through presence, not through conquest, but through awakening. You begin to notice things others overlook. You begin to hear what people aren't saying. You forgive the masks, the mistakes, the moments you betrayed yourself just to belong. Not because it was okay, but because you're ready to be whole again. And now, listen carefully. This rebellion isn't something you do once. It's something you live. You will have to choose it again and again. In conversations, in decisions, in the mirror. You will fall back into the old roles. You will forget. You will hurt. But you will remember more quickly. You will return more powerfully. You will rebuild more truthfully. Because now you know. The mirror lies, but your soul doesn't. And once you've tasted truth, illusion is starvation. So here you are, a rebel of the inner world, a revolutionary with no flag, no anthem. Just the steady beat of your own heart, finally heard. But one final veil remains, one final lie to confront. It is the deepest, the oldest, the one hiding not in society, but in reality itself. Are you ready? Because what comes next is not just about freedom from illusion. It's about what you truly are, beneath every mirror, mask, and memory. Imagine this. There is no mirror, not broken, not cracked, not distorted, not framed. Just no mirror at all. No surface reflecting back your curated image. No echo chamber of opinions shaping your truth. No artificial you looking back, waiting to be fixed or validated or praised. Only silence, only space, only being. And in this space, something ancient stirs. It is not a voice, but a knowing. Not a thought, but a presence. Not a self to be improved, but a self that simply is. You stand there, naked, raw, unbeheld, and realize the most terrifying, liberating truth. You were never broken. What shattered wasn't your soul. It was your reflection. What fractured wasn't your essence. It was the story you were forced to believe. What needed healing was never your worth, but your perception of it. And here's the final paradox. Everything you were seeking was never missing. The truth, the final, unshakable, cosmic truth, is that there was nothing to become. You've been chasing a horizon made of smoke, climbing ladders that loop in circles, trying to earn what was never up for negotiation. You were already whole. You were already free. You were already you. But you had to forget, to remember. You had to become lost in mirrors, masks, metrics, to feel the sharp ache of absence. You had to taste the bitterness of self-betrayal, to recognize the sweetness of authenticity. You had to live inside the dream, to know the weight of awakening. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." But what if the why is simply this? To be, not to accomplish, not to impress, not even to heal, but to exist fully without condition. To live as a question, not an answer. To flow like a river, not hold like a dam. To see life not as a problem to solve, but as a mystery to inhabit. And here comes the part most cannot bear. There is no final version of you, no ideal self waiting at the end of the path. No moment where the world claps and says, "You've arrived," because arrival is a myth. You were home the whole time. You just forgot how to sit still. Sit still now. Breathe. Feel the thrum of your own heartbeat, not as proof of survival, but as a song of being. Notice how you don't have to earn it, how the heart beats, because it does, because you are. There is a liberation in this that frightens the ego, because if you need nothing, desire nothing, fix nothing, then what does the ego do? It dies, or rather it dissolves into silence, into presence, into something vast and unnamed. Arthur Schopenhauer called the world a veil of Maya, an illusion cloaking the raw truth of existence. He believed suffering came from our will, our endless craving. But he also knew release is possible, and release doesn't look like achievement. It looks like letting go. Letting go of the chase, letting go of the need to be seen, letting go of the idea that you are incomplete. And in that letting go, you don't disappear. You expand. You become the sky instead of the cloud, the ocean instead of the wave, the silence behind every word. Now ask yourself, what if your pain wasn't punishment? What if your struggle wasn't failure? What if your darkness was not a flaw but a womb, a place where light gestates, where the soul returns to remember what it is, where the ego fractures so the truth can pour in? This is not poetic metaphor. This is reality, the one beneath society's mirror, beneath the mind's chatter, beneath the world's applause. You are not the reflection. You are the light behind it. You are not the name. You are the awareness hearing it. You are not even the body. You are the consciousness animating it. And when you see this, not as an idea, but as a knowing, you stop fearing the mirror, because now you don't need it. You can look at yourself and no longer ask, do I look good enough? You can walk into a room and no longer wonder, am I too much or not enough? You can live, breathe, speak, weep, love, leave, create, and rest. Not as a performance, but as a birthright. And the world? The world will still try to reflect something false. It will still offer you new masks. It will still seduce you back into the game. But you will smile gently. You will nod kindly. And you will remember, I am not what I see. I am what sees. And from that place, deep, quiet, luminous, you will live. Not as a rebel, not as a seeker, not even as a survivor, but as a presence, unshaken, unmasked, untamed. Because in the end, the greatest revolution is not against society or mirrors or lies. It is the revolution of remembering. And once you do, nothing, not culture, not conditioning, not fear, not even time, can take it from you again. You have returned. And now you are free.